So we have had all types of arguments, from rain, economic arguments, drain, fire, Cosacus arguments, from Sani, all types of arguments about methods of taxation, about method of payment, and role of government, democratically elected government, and role of courts, and benefits of user charges type of system of taxes. Yeah, it's a very, very complex situation.
Firstly, we do recognize that government has the mandate to apply taxation and to do its job. But government doesn't always get it right, gets it wrong from time to time. And in this case, they got it so wrong because they never engaged with society properly. Now, had they engaged with society, because we're not saying that tolling must never exist. Tolling exists in countries where society has been engaged with, where the costs have come down, where alternative transport opportunities, routes, and modes of transport are put in place to overcome some of the problems. We believe that had they done that properly, we could have found the solution. So to say now, after the fact, well, let's talk and let's try and resolve this. It's very late. The gantries are up and the rules are out there. The rules of engagement are now in SANRAL and government's court, and it's almost an attitude of, we're going to just force this onto you. You're going to have to take it or leave it. That's the dangerous place where society rebels. We have seen tolling systems around the world collapse purely because they are too onerous on society, they're too costly, they lacked consultation, they lacked transparency. You've seen the blacked out pages and the lack of consultation that took place, and the lack of participation of society. That's exactly what's happened here in GFA. They flew below the radar screen, they did as minimal consultation as possible, and now they say, but please, don't fight, come on board, just come bear with us, and let's go down this road together. Problem is the costs are going to be exonerous going forward, because it's the thin edge of the wedge. You can lower the rates as much as you like. You don't lower the cost of tolling. I think that if they had taken half of that money and put it into a good public transport system 5 years ago, we wouldn't be having some of the problems that we have today. Had government applied a 9-cent increase in the fuel price into the fuel levy in 2006 when the ETOL plan was mooted, and they add the 5.7 billion rand they put in last year, we would have raised 17 billion rand. That's the road cost. The capital cost of this road has already been paid off had they applied the mechanism that we have suggested. Why not? I mean, it's so simple. There's no admin cost, whereas this one costs 1.7 billion. And then what's the compliance rate? 100%. You can't not pay the fuel levy. You can't not put fuel in your car to drive.
Okay, so your proposal is to ring-fence the fuel levy.
If you really are desperate, and we believe government's not desperate, that fuel levy is there. The funding is there for this road. The economic benefits that we get for the whole country for Gauteng's freeways are enormous. And that's the benefit that society gets nationally. So we believe that money's in that R2.13 right now. Last year it was R1.98 in prior to. But if you're desperate, if the government is really desperate for it, and they put 9 cents onto the fuel levy, they will pay back the infrastructure plus interest in the 20 years.
That's a proposal. It's again about method of payment.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer the issue of equity, because I do think it's very, very misleading. Forgive me for saying that. But honestly, it's like picking and choosing how you look at equity. We've got to accept Gauteng is the industrial hub of the country. What happens here is critical to the rest of the economy. And, it's very important that we have an efficient transport system, efficient roads, efficient railways, everything, so that things don't get congested, that business and society can work in this industrial hub. Now, to argue that something like roads must only be paid for by those who directly are the direct users. If we start going down that route, then we're going down the Thatcher route. The fuel levy itself is a user pay, it's a user pay principle. There are different forms of the user pay principle, but this very narrow notion that if you enter that road, you've got to pay for it, is highly problematic. It segments society, it pushes a burden of cost that is unfair onto those youth, and it basically forces people out of the system, and that's why we think it's far from equitable. It's inequitable.
I don't want to be technical here and say this is what the court has already said, because the court has expressed itself on the extent to which information was given, and where they said they think it was sufficient. But I made a comment.
So you're talking about consultation?
Consultation, yeah, public participation, consultation, and so the court has already, ruled on the matter that yes, indeed, people were informed. I mean, Wayne says 2006 already, as far back as 2006, he was aware of it, and there is many other people who were aware of it. In fact, if you were to go through the archives of the Star newspapers, amongst others, you will see that already 7-8 years ago there was a, information that existed about this. So it would be incorrect to say government marketed it as a part of a 2010 World Cup project. But the point I want to make is, especially because we may have students here with interest in project management and so on, I said that as a nation, as a teenage nation that we are, just as much as you yourself will go through motions negotiating certain things with your teenage boy or a teenage girl, these are some of the experiences we can equate them to, because there's a view that, and the court confirms that there was indeed public consultation that took place. Some people are saying it wasn't sufficient. So the question is, going forward, how then do we communicate? How then do we communicate better? How then and we've taken that as a lesson as a state, that we may have to use other means other than the means that we use, so that in future, a project like this, we don't have the questions that are being raised there.
I think the point that Wayne was elaborating is that tolling by definition is cost inefficient. That's the problem. It's not about making tolling more efficient. You probably can't get much more efficient than the new systems that have been put up. I mean, the e-tolling it doesn't require the same number of people, etc., etc., etc. So I mean, they've already driven the cost down, but it's a cost inefficient system by definition, because you have to spend money in order to get the money back. The point about the fuel levy or taxation and adjusting the taxation method is that it doesn't cost you anything more than you're already spending on collecting taxation or collecting fuel.
Can I just say that our court case, we would not have been granted leave to appeal if the case wasn't strong. The fact that there's been a ruling that they can continue, this law that regulation still has to be approved at the National Council of Provinces, doesn't stop them from starting now. In fact, they said in August last year they will launch to the courts, they will launch within 2 weeks, because they needed the funds, they were stressed, and their credit ratings were being heavily impacted. And they've taken 7 months and they still cannot launch today. With or without the regulations, the system is still failing tests. They had to put another 100 million rand worth of servers in because of the non-compliance that's been expected. So they can't launch, but they will try to launch in the next 2 months, they've said. And that's going to be very messy, but they do that with a big sword hanging over their head, because if in the Supreme Court of Appeal it is ruled as illegal, then they've got a problem. Now they will take that back to the Constitutional Court, but the argument is very different to what it was when it was in the Constitutional Court, because the Constitutional Court in September ruled purely on the setting aside the temporary interdict. It never ruled on the facts of the case, because the facts of the case hadn't been argued yet in the review. So this could still be stopped, and I can tell you now, we wouldn't be going down this road if we felt we had a flimsy case. It's an extremely strong case. We've tested it with many external legal opinions, not just our own, because we don't get high on our own gas, so to speak. So it's not a fait accompli, but they've been given the go-ahead to try and force this golf ball down this hose pipe. It's going to be extremely messy, because you do not have the buy-in of society. And that's a danger they run. They run two dangers. The court's ruling illegal, and the second one, which is their biggest hurdle, society saying we're not going to come to the party. And they're not coming to the party. And we asked the DA and AfriForum to extricate themselves from this case because we didn't want it to become a political football. This is a case for the people and had to be funded by the people. All our funding, 8.2 million rand so far, has been funded by business and the public at large. That's it. It's not funded, and we have got nothing to do with the DA. The DA support us in person as do the consortium, as does, by the way, every single other political entity other than the ANC.
There's no support from COSATU, also there's no financial
There's
support.
no financial support, nothing from COSATU. We'd love them to give us money. But your tax money, by the way, is funding the government's case. Every single cent of it is paid for by you.
I just want to say a big thank you to our guest speakers and panelists for spending time with us. You know, it's late and you're tired and so many other things to worry. And you know, this is the big cloud, man. For many years, you know, you invested your life.